Funding for this program is provided by additional funding provided by. This is a course about justice, and we begin with a story. Suppose you're the driver of a trolley car, and your trolley car is hurtling down the track at 60 miles an hour, and at the end of the track you notice 5 workers working on the track. You tried to stop, but you can't, your brakes don't work. You feel desperate because you know that if you crash into these 5 workers, they will all die. Let's assume you know that for sure. And so you feel helpless until you notice that there is off to the right a side track at the end of that track. There's one worker working on track, your steering wheel works, so you can turn the trolley car if you want to onto this side track, killing the one but sparing the 5. Here's our first question. What's the right thing to do? What would you do? Let's take a poll. How many would turn the trolley car onto the side track? How many wouldn't? How many would go straight ahead? Keep your hands up. Those of you who'd go straight ahead. A handful of people would. The vast majority would turn. Let's hear first. Now we need to begin to investigate the reasons why you think it's the right thing to do. Let's begin with those in the majority. Who would turn to go onto sidetrack? Why would you do it? What would be your reason? Who's willing to volunteer a reason? Go ahead, stand up. Because it can't be right to kill 5 people, when you can only kill 1 person instead. It wouldn't be right to kill 5 if you could kill 1 person instead. That's a good reason. That's a good reason. Who else? Does everybody agree with that reason? Go ahead. Well, I was thinking it was the same reason it was on September 11th. We regard the people who flew the plane into the Pennsylvania field as heroes because they chose to kill the people on the plane and not kill more people in big buildings. So the principle there was the same on September 11th. It's tragic circumstance, but better to kill 1 so that 5 can live. Is that the reason most of you have? Those of you who would turn, yes? Let's hear now from those in the minority, those who wouldn't turn. Well, I think that same type of mentality that justifies genocide and totalitarianism, in order to save one type of race, you wipe out the other. So what would you do in this case? You would, to avoid the horrors of genocide, you would crash into the 5 and kill them? Presumably, yes. Okay, who else? That's a brave answer, thank you. Let's consider another trolley car case and see whether those of you in the majority want to adhere to the principle. Better that 1 should die so that 5 should live. This time, you're not the driver of the trolley car, you're an onlooker standing on a bridge overlooking a trolley car track. And down the track comes a trolley car. At the end of the track are 5 workers. The brakes don't work. The trolley car is about to careen into the 5 and kill them, and now you're not the driver. You really feel helpless until you notice standing next to you, leaning over the bridge. Is it very fat man? And you could give him a shove, he would fall over the bridge, onto the track, right in the way of the trolley car. He would die, but he would spare the 5. Now, how many would push the fat man over the bridge? Raise your hand. How many wouldn't? Most people wouldn't. Here's the obvious question. What became of the principle better to save 5 lives, even if it means sacrificing 1? What became of the principle that almost everyone endorsed? In the first case, I need to hear from someone who was in the majority in both cases is, how do you explain the difference between the two? The second one, I guess, involves an active choice of pushing a person and down, which I guess that person himself would otherwise not have been involved in the situation at all. And so to choose on his behalf, I guess, to involve him in something that he otherwise would have this escaped, is, I guess, more than what you have in the first case, where the 3 parties, the driver and the 2 sets of workers, are already, I guess, in this situation. But the guy working, the one on the track off to the side, he didn't choose to sacrifice his life any more than the fat guy did he? That's true, but he was on the tracks. This guy was on the bridge. Go ahead. You can come back if you want. All right, it's a hard question, but you did well. You did very well. It's a hard question. Who else can find a way of reconciling the reaction of the majority in these 2 cases? Yes? Well, I guess in the first case, where you have the 1 worker and the 5, it's a choice between those 2. And you have to make a certain choice, and people are going to die because of the trolley car, not necessarily because of your direct actions. The trolley car is a runway thing, and you need to make in a split-second choice. Whereas pushing the fat man over is an actual act of murder on your part. You have control over that, whereas you may not have control over the trolley car. So I think that it's a slightly different situation. All right, who has a reply? Is that who has a reply to that? No, that was good. Who has a way who wants to reply? Is that a way out of this? I don't think that's a very good reason, because you choose either way you have to choose who dies. Because you either choose to turn and kill a person, which is an act of conscious thought to turn, or you choose to push the fat man over, which is also an active conscious action. So either way, you're making a choice. Do you want to reply? Well, I'm not really sure that that's the case. It just still seems kind of different. The act of actually pushing someone over onto the tracks and killing them, you are actually killing him yourself. You're pushing him with your own hands. You're pushing, and that's different than steering something that is going to cause death into another. It doesn't really sound right saying it now when I'm up here. No, that's good. What's your name? Andrew. Andrew, and let me ask you this question, Andrew. Suppose standing on the bridge next to the fat man I didn't have to push him. Suppose he was standing over a trapdoor that I could open by turning a steering wheel like that, would you turn it? For some reason, that still just seems more wrong. I mean, maybe if you just accidentally leaned into the steering wheel or something like that, or say that the car is hurtling towards a switch that will drop the trap, then I could agree with that. Fair enough. It still seems wrong in a way that it doesn't seem wrong in the first case to turn, you say, and in another way. I mean, in the first situation, you're involved directly with the situation. In the second one, you're an onlooker as well. So you have the choice of becoming involved or not by pushing the fat man. Let's forget for the moment about this case. That's good. But let's imagine a different case. This time, you're doctor in an emergency room and 6 patients come to you. They've been in a terrible trolley car wreck. 5 of them sustained moderate injuries. 1 is severely injured. You could spend all day caring for the 1 severely injured victim. But in that time, the 5 would die. Or you could look after the 5, restore them to health. But during that time, the 1 severely injured person would die. How many would save the 5 now as the doctor? How many would save the 1? Very few people, just a handful of people. Same reason I assume, 1 life versus 5. Now consider another doctor case. This time you're a transplant surgeon and you have 5 patients each in desperate need of an organ transplant in order to survive on needs a heart 1, a lung 1, a kidney 1, a liver, and the 5th, a pancreas. And you have no organ donors you are about to see them die. And then it occurs to you that in the next room, there's a healthy guy who came in for a checkup. And he is you like that, and he's taking a nap. You could go in very quietly, yank out the 5 organs. That person would die, but you can save the 5. How many would do it? Anyone? How many? Put your hands up if you would do it. Anyone in the balcony? You would? Be careful, don't lean over too much. How many wouldn't? All right, what do you say? Speak up in the balcony. You who would yank out the organs? Why? I'd actually like to explore slightly alternate possibility of just taking the 1 of the 5 he needs an organ who dies first and using their 4 healthy organs to save the other 4. That's a pretty good idea. That's a great idea. Except for the fact that you just wrecked the philosophical point. Let's step back from these stories and these arguments to notice a couple of things about the way the arguments have began to unfold. Certain moral principles have already begun to emerge from the discussions we've had, and let's consider what those moral principles look like. The first moral principle that emerged from the discussion said that the right thing to do, the moral thing to do, depends on the consequences that will result from your action. At the end of the day, better that 5 should live, even if 1 must die. That's an example of consequentialist moral reasoning. Consequentialist moral reasoning locates morality in the consequences of an act, in the state of the world that will result from the thing you do. But then we went a little further. We considered those other cases, and people weren't so sure about consequentialist moral reasoning when people hesitated to push the fat man over the bridge or to yank out the organs of the innocent patient. People gestured towards reasons having to do with the intrinsic quality of the act itself. Consequences be what they may. People were reluctant. People thought it was just wrong, categorically wrong to kill a person, an innocent person, even for the sake of saving 5 lives. At least these people thought that in the second version of each story we reconsidered. So this points a second categorical way of thinking about moral reasoning. Categorical moral reasoning locates morality in certain absolute moral requirements, in certain categorical duties and rights regardless of the consequences. We're going to explore in the days and weeks to come the contrast between consequentialist and categorical moral principles. The most influential example of consequential moral reasoning is utilitarianism, a doctrine invented by Jeremy Bentham, the 18th century English political philosopher. The most important philosopher of categorical moral reasoning is the 18th century German philosopher Immanuel Kant. So we will look at those two different modes of moral reasoning, assess them, and also consider others. If you look at the syllabus, you'll notice that we read a number of great and famous books. Books by Aristotle, John Locke, Immanuel Kant, John Stuart Mill, and others. You'll notice too from the syllabus that we don't only read these books, we also all take up contemporary political and legal controversies that raise philosophical questions. We will debate equality and inequality, affirmative action, free speech versus hate speech, same-sex marriage, military conscription, a range of practical questions. Why not just to enliven these abstract and distant books, but to make clear to bring out what's at stake in our everyday lives, including our political lives, for philosophy. So we will read these books and we will debate these issues and we'll see how each informs and illuminates the other. This may sound appealing enough, but here I have to issue a warning, and the warning is this: to read these books in this way, as an exercise in self-knowledge. To read them in this way carry certain risks that are both personal and political, risks that every student of political philosophy have known. These risks spring from that fact that philosophy teaches us and unsettles us by confronting us with what we already know. There's an irony. The difficulty of this course consists in the fact that it teaches what you already know. It works by taking what we know from familiar, unquestioned settings and making it strange. That's how those examples worked the hypotheticals with which we began, with their mix of playfulness and sobriety. It's also how these philosophical books work. Philosophy estranges us from the familiar, not by supplying new information but by inviting and provoking a new way of seeing. And here's the risk: once the familiar turns strange, it's never quite the same again. Self-knowledge is like lost innocence. However unsettling you find it, it can never be unthought or unknown. What makes this enterprise difficult but also riveting is that moral and political philosophy is a story, and you don't know where this story will lead, but what you do know is that the story is about you. Those are the personal risks. Now what of the political risks? One way of introducing, of course, like this would be to promise you that by reading these books and debating these issues, you will become a better, more responsible citizen. You will examine the presuppositions of public policy. You will hone your political judgment. You'll become a more effective participant in public affairs. But this would be a partial and misleading promise. Political philosophy, for the most part, hasn't worked that way. You have to allow for the possibility that political philosophy may make you a worse citizen rather than a better one, or at least a worse citizen before it makes you a better one. And that's because philosophy is a distancing, even debilitating activity. And you see this going back to Socrates. There's a dialogue, the Gorgias, in which one of Socrates' friends, Callicles, tries to talk him out of philosophizing. Callicles tells Socrates philosophy is a pretty toy if one indulges in it with moderation at the right time of life, but if one pursues it further than one should, it is absolute ruin. Take my advice, Callicles says, abandon argument, learn the accomplishments of active life. Take for your models not those people who spend their time on these petty quibbles, but those who have a good livelihood and reputation and many other blessings. So Callicles is really saying to Socrates, quit philosophizing. Get real, go to business school. And Callicles did have a point. He had a point. Because philosophy distances us from conventions, from established assumptions, and from settled beliefs. Those are the risks, personal and political. And in the face of these risks, there is a characteristic evasion. The name of the evasion is skepticism. It's the idea, well, it goes something like this: we didn't resolve, once and for all, either the cases or the principles we were arguing when we began. And if Aristotle and Locke and Kant and Mill haven't solved these questions, after all of these years, who are we to think that we here in Sanders Theater over the course of a semester can resolve them? And so maybe it's just a matter of each person having his or her own principles, and there's nothing more to be said about it. No way of reasoning. That's the evasion. The evasion of skepticism, to which I would offer the following reply. It's true these questions have been debated for a very long time. but the very fact that they have reoccurred and persisted may suggest that though they're impossible in one sense, they're unavoidable in another. And the reason they're unavoidable, the reason they're inescapable, is that we live some answer to these questions every day. So skepticism, just throwing up their hands and giving up on moral reflection, is no solution Immanuel Kant described very well. The problem with skepticism when he wrote Skepticism is a resting place for human reason, where it can reflect upon its dogmatic wanderings, but it is no dwelling place for permanent settlement. Simply to acquiesce in skepticism, Kant wrote, can never suffice to overcome the restless of reason. I've tried to suggest, through theses, stories, and these arguments, some sense of the risks and temptations of the perils and the possibilities. I would simply conclude by saying that the aim of this course is to awaken the restlessness of reason and to see where it might lead. Thank you very much. Like, in a situation that desperate, you have to do what you have to do to survive. You have to do what you have to do you've got to do what you got to do. Pretty much, if you've been going 19 days without any food, someone has to take the sacrifice, someone has to make the sacrifice, and people can survive. Alright, that's good. What's your name? Marcus. Marcus, what do you say to Marcus? Last time we started out with some stores with some moral dilemmas about trolley cars and about doctors and healthy patients vulnerable to being victims of organ transplantation. We noticed two things about the arguments we had. One had to do with the way we were arguing. It began with our judgments. In particular cases, we tried to articulate the reasons or the principles lying behind our judgments, and then confronted with a new case. We found ourselves re-examining those principles, revising each in the light of the other, and we noticed the built-in pressure to try to bring into alignment our judgments about particular cases, and the principles we would endorse on reflection. We also noticed something about the substance of the arguments that emerged from the discussion. We noticed that sometimes we were tempted to locate the morality of an act in the consequences, in the results, in the state of the world that it brought about. We called as consequentialist moral reason. But we also noticed that in some cases we weren't swayed only by the results. Sometimes, many of us felt, that not just consequences, but also the intrinsic quality or character of the act matters morally. Some people argued that there are certain things that are just categorically wrong, even if they bring about a good result, even if they save 5 people at the cost of 1 life. So we contrasted consequentialist moral principles with categorical ones. Today, and in the next few days, we will begin to examine one of the most influential versions of consequentialist moral theory, and that's the philosophy of utilitarianism. Jeremy Bentham, the 18th century English political philosopher, gave the first clear systematic expression to the utilitarian moral theory. And Bentham's idea, his essential idea, is a very simple one, with a lot of morally intuitive appeal. Bentham's idea is the following: the right thing to do, the just thing to do. It's to maximize utility. What did he mean by utility? He meant by utility the balance of pleasure over pain, happiness over suffering. Here's how we arrived at the principle of maximizing utility. He started out by observing that all of us, all human beings, are governed by 2 sovereign masters, pain and pleasure. We human beings like pleasure and dislike pain, and so we should base morality, whether we are thinking of what to do in our own lives, or whether as legislators or citizens, we are thinking about what the law should be. The right thing to do, individually or collectively, is to maximize. Act in a way that maximizes the overall level of happiness. Bentham's utilitarianism is sometimes summed up with the slogan, "the greatest good for the greatest number." With this basic principle of utility on hand, let's begin to test it, and to examine it by turning to another case, another story, but this time not a hypothetical story, a real-life story, the case of the Queen versus Dudley and Stevens. This was a 19th century British law case that's famous and much debated in law schools. Here's what happened in the case. I'll summarize the story, and then I want to hear how you would rule, imagining that you are the jury. A newspaper account of the time described the background. A sadder story of disaster at sea was never told than that of the survivors of the yacht Mignonette. The ship foundered in the South Atlantic, 1,300 miles from the Cape. There were 4 in the crew. Dudley was the captain. Stevens was the first mate. Brooks was a sailor. All men of excellent character, or so the newspaper account tells us. The fourth crew member was the cabin boy, Richard Parker, 17 years old. He was an orphan, he had no family, and he was on his first long voyage at sea. He went, the news account tells us, rather against the advice of his friends. He went in the hopefulness of youthful ambition, thinking the journey would make a man of him. Sadly, it was not to be. The facts of the case were not in dispute. A wave hit the ship and the mignonette went down. The 4 crew members escaped to a lifeboat. The only food they had were 2 cans of preserved turnips. No fresh water for the first 3 days. They ate nothing on the 4th day. That opened one of the cans of turnips and ate it. The next day they caught a turtle together with the other can of turnips. The turtle enabled them to subsist for the next few days, and then for 8 days they had nothing. No food, no water. Imagine yourself in a situation like that. What would you do? Here's what they did by now. The cabin boy Parker is lying at the bottom of the lifeboat in a corner because he had drunk seawater against the advice of the others, and he had become ill, and he appeared to be dying. So on the 19th day, Dudley, the captain, suggested that they should all have a lottery, that they should all draw lots to see who would die to save the rest. Brooks refused. He didn't like the lottery idea. We don't know whether this was because he didn't want to take that chance or because he believed in categorical moral principles, but in any case, no lots were drawn. The next day there was still no ship in sight, so Dudley told Brooks to avert his gaze and he motioned to Stevens that the boy Parker had better be killed. Dudley offered a prayer. He told the boy his time had come and he killed him with a penknife, stabbing him in the jugular vein. Brooks emerged from his conscientious objection to share in the gruesome bounty. For 4 days the 3 of them fed on the body and blood of the cabin boy. True story. And then they were rescued.